Program that helps renters in Quincy is already working. You'll remember it started just this year to make it easier to file complaints. And WGEM's Shakayla McCamick is here with an update on what improvements officials are seeing after just 1 month. Shakayla.
Mackenzie, some tenants may have fear when filing a minimum housing complaint form when their home is in need of repair. And if your home has significant issues, that could be concerning to your health and safety. That's why the Safe and Livable Housing Committee in Quincy introduced their advocacy program at the start of the year. The program places tenants with advocates who help them understand how and when to fill out the complaint forms with the city's inspection department. This allows tenants to voice complaints with their landlord only when they need to, without the fear of retribution. More than 30 Quincy organizations are in the advocacy program right now, and committee members say they've already seen more inspections than they typically do, which means more people are taking steps to have safe housing.
Normally you get maybe 2 or 3 a month, maybe resulting in 1 or 2 inspections. We're up to 6 inspections, which meant the overall number was even higher. And that's amazing because normally Quincy does 12 to 15 inspections in a year.
The advocate program is the basic first improvement. Now that we can help people have a voice to know that they have someone who's watching out for their back. Like I said, if we know that they're doing something wrong, we need to let them know that, you know, we're not going to lie, we're not going to be dishonest. We have to be straightforward with everyone as to how everybody needs to do their part.
In addition to starting the advocacy program, the City of Quincy has made the minimum complaint form available online. Officials with the Safe and Livable Housing Committee say that should allow more tenants to fill out the form, as it takes away the pressure of doing it at City Hall. Shakayla McCamick, WGEM News.
All right, thank you so much, Shakayla. And you can access the minimum complaint form and resources to find it and advocate on WGEM.com.